God's idea and approach to familia and our approach to familia are often quite different, for the simple reason that we think as human beings do and not necessarily as God does. We get our understanding of family and our own self-identity based upon our formative years. So we human beings tend to think of ourselves as similar to firstborn children, where we end up starting off in this nurturing, wonderful environment of knowing that we are beloved by our adoring parents, that somehow we have them wrapped around our finger, that we are the center of our parents' universe. Everything is wonderful. And then siblings start to show up. And we start to realize that we're not the center of the universe, that our parents' love extends beyond just ourselves to our siblings. And suddenly our parents start to place expectations, almost demands upon us that we be responsible, that we're supposed to be sensitive to the vulnerable, our weaker sisters and brothers, our siblings, and to train them appropriately, that we have a responsibility to care for them and develop a relationship. And that is a hard lesson for us to learn because it takes us from our comfort zone to expand us into something else. And if we're resistant to this, we are not really growing up in the way that we should. So we're like children in a sandbox. And we have our toys, and the pile of sand is all ours. And then once we're expected to share those resources with another child, we feel that somehow we have been lessened. Instead of expecting and understanding that maybe through the sharing process, through the interaction with other children, that we might have a greater sense of creativity, that our imagination won't be operating in isolation, but together with the interaction with another free will, another creative imagination, much more wonderful things can happen than we're stuck in our own little isolated bubble of security. So in our first reading, God is telling the Jews that he's going to reconvene them as a nation, that they've gone through some sibling rivalries and have splintered off into different places, and that's not what God had planned for. And I think even the people themselves recognized that this brokenness of their community was not helpful. Unfortunately, the wording probably allowed some of the Jews to think that the correction was going to occur on the other side of the family, that somehow we didn't have any sins to atone for or repent from. It was the other characters, those other people that needed to straighten things out. And so we have to realize that when Jesus comes along and gives us parables like the father or the prodigal son, the love for all the children is beyond our comparison, beyond our understanding, and that the comeuppance that we think that needs to occur may simply be in our own camp. Maybe we don't understand what it means to be a loving family as well as God does. So here we're in a situation where we seem pretty splintered off, broken up, each locked down to our own place of security as we shelter in place during this pandemic. And I would imagine that we're probably starting to recognize that our sense of community is somehow lacking in some of the ways that we thought were our primary form of security, and perhaps expanding in other ways that we didn't think were as important. Just this communication via a YouTube channel demonstrates that there are other options out there for developing a sense of community. Is it the same? No, certainly not. Is it any less effective? That's yet to be seen. But the reality is God expects us to work on this collaboration called a family. Doing so in the way that we do not think that we have to reform ourselves as the king of the sandbox, or we're only going to allow in our closest family members. Instead, God's family is much larger than our prejudice, our bigotry, our narrow-mindedness. So as we move forward, we have to realize that this coming together of one nation may not be in the model that we think. It may not be coming back to our individual parishes. It may not even be coming down to a particular parish. It might be a case that this gospel message, this discipleship that we're called to participate in, is engaging the people of God in a whole new and different way. That really shakes us up if we think of ourselves as only being able to live and deal with one little sandbox. In reality, as long as we're that narrow-minded, we really haven't grown up in the Spirit.